Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to this ABB Enterprise Software presentation, CENACE, the next frontier in ISO markets. Today's speakers from the ABB Enterprise Software Velocity Suite team are Ryan Klein and David Kelley.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we discuss the implementation of CENACE as an ISO. If you have any questions at any point, please feel free to submit them using the chat window, and I'll do my best to answer them either during the presentation or at the conclusion. So let's go ahead and get started. There have been some pretty big developments in Mexico as they implement a new deregulated wholesale energy market, and we just wanted to discuss some of these developments, talk about the data that's coming out of CENACE, and provide some examples of ways to utilize this data within the Velocity Suite. So this is our standard disclaimer, but in addition to this, I also wanted to mention that all the data that's presented within this presentation is going to be considered preliminary, and the CENACE go-live date is slated for January 1st of 2017. So allow me to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Ryan Klein, and I've been in the energy industry for over 5 years, and I'm currently an analyst in the Market Operations Division of the Velocity Suite team. You'll hear from David Kelley a little bit later, and I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself.
Good morning. My name is David Kelley, Power Analyst here at Velocity Suite, and a little later I'll be addressing the main intentions of Mexico's energy reform.
All right, so for those of you who don't know, the Velocity Suite is the energy industry's premier analytical source for information. We take great pride in providing a robust collection of energy data, and the deeply rooted entity backbone of the Velocity Suite really allows for a broad range of different types of analysis. We often hear the Velocity Suite referred to as the gold standard for energy market analysis, simply due to its ease of use at accessing a robust set of data and the seamless ability to represent that data in a variety of different ways. Today, though, we really want to focus on the implementation of CENACE as an independent system operator and what that means for energy markets in Mexico. So let's go ahead and take a look at our agenda for today. We'll start by looking at what is going to be changing from the current privatized CFP structure to the new deregulated CENACE ISO. Then we'll discuss what data is currently available from CENACE. We'll touch on what data we expect to be released out of CENACE. And finally, we'll do some sample analysis on the preliminary data that's already available using some of the tools actually within the Velocity Suite. So let's start by taking a look at what will be changing with the implementation of CENACE as an ISO. So what is actually happening here? Well, Mexico's decided to create a deregulated wholesale electricity market. Now, as an ISO, the Centro Nacional de Control de Energía, or CENACE, will operate the new wholesale electricity market, which will include the sales of electricity, ancillary services, capacity, financial transmission rights, clean energy certificates, as well as some other products. Up until now, CENACE has really existed as a unit within the Comisión Federal de Electricidad, or CFE. However, CENACE will soon be the system operator of the entire grid and no longer under the management of CFE. So once implemented, CENACE as an ISO will be regulated and supervised by the Ministry of Energy, or CENARE here, and the Comisión Reguladora de Energía, or CRE. Now, by creating a deregulated market as opposed to the CFE-managed system that's currently in place, Mexico is developing a deregulated wholesale energy market very similar to the ISO structures in place currently here in the U.S. By implementing this type of market, there will be reduced energy costs as competition increases. Now, this leads to better price assurance as more market players actually provide better price stability. Now, by relying on Southwest Power Pool as an example, CENACE was able to actually see direct results from the implementation of this kind of market as SPP's deregulated wholesale market went live in early 2014. We at ABB were actually involved with some of the discussions CENACE had with SPP, and were able to assist in providing some insight for this undertaking. And being a part of the process makes us pretty uniquely poised to be at the forefront of this transition. In general, this type of market provides better overall access to electricity by regionally balancing supply and demand, centralizing market structures and processes, as well as allowing for better integration of renewable resources, which is actually a major focus in Mexican energy markets. Now, to accomplish this transition, there were actually several hurdles that needed to be addressed. So to effectively facilitate this new market, new expertise was necessary to accurately develop and implement some of the more technical products and processes that didn't exist previously in Mexico. Now, this new structure is much more complex than the current CFE market that's in place, and changing current patterns and routines to accommodate the deregulated wholesale energy market takes both time and effort. So what exactly is a deregulated wholesale market? Well, it's a system in which electric grid congestion and pricing information can and will be captured at more than 2,000 nodes. This improves market and operating efficiencies through more granular pricing and scheduling of energy services. But how is this market structure really better than the current zonal structure? Well, the nodal pricing structure lends itself to improved pricing signals throughout the entire grid. Now, with these improved signals, CENACE will be able to more efficiently dispatch generation to centralized load pockets. This structure also provides for better anticipation of grid conditions to alleviate localized congestion, as well as better identification of which resources are the root cause of this congestion when it occurs. So by pinpointing the root cause of congestion, CENACE can really identify potential areas for infrastructure development. All right, so this is a map of Mexico as the market currently exists. You see here the 42 zones listed on the right, with each represented as a triangle within Mexico. CFE used to publish hourly prices for these 42 zones. They were pretty general and definitely not nodally based. And a final aggregate zone, resumen todos los nodos, was used to represent areas in Mexico that didn't appear within the constructs of this 42-zone system. This directly translates to remaining nodes. So as an example, if you were located near Fresnillo in the middle of Mexico, the problem arises as to what price you'll be paying for electricity. Do you use one of those zonal points around you, or are you pooled into the remaining nodes pricing category? Well, in either case, you're probably not going to be paying a true representative price for consuming this electricity. So as of January 1st, 2017, as opposed to simply having these 42 zones, CENACE is implementing a deregulated wholesale energy market. Now, the CENACE entity structure is very complex, but we here at ABB have done the research so that we could really understand the way CENACE is constructed. Through that research, we've been able to create this graphical breakdown of the CENACE entity structure. Now, as far as I know, we're the only people doing this sort of graphical representation, but I think it really gives some insight into CENACE as an ISO. Now, under the CENACE umbrella, there will actually be 3 independent systems that are managed by the National Center of Energy Control, which is CENACE. These are going to be Baja California Sur, and Sistema Interconectado Nacional, or SIN for short. These are going to be green in the tree on this slide. Now, while Baja and Baja Sur exist as their own control centers, the SIN system is further broken out into 7 control centers. These are Central, Oriental, Occidental, Noreste, Noroeste, Norte, and Peninsular. These are represented in yellow, and there are 9 in total, including Baja and Baja Sur. Now, each control center is further divided into zonas de carga, which is directly translated as loading zones. These are going to be the boxes in purple. Now, these loading zones receive LMP prices and exist within the Velocity Suite as zone price nodes. There are currently 104 of them. And finally, each of these purple loading zones is further broken down into individual price nodes. These aren't shown, but there are more than 2,000 individual price nodes receiving LMP data already. Now, this is compared to the 42 individual zones receiving prices under the CFE umbrella. So here you can see the breakout of those 3 systems, that's Baja, Baja Sur, and SIN, represented in green on the previous slide. These 3 main systems act independently of each other for the most part. You can see the SIN system makes up most of the Mexican mainland, with Baja California being broken into 2 separate systems to the north and south. So if we go down 1 level on our entity tree here, we see the ISO zones directly translated as control centers. You can see here that to the west, Baja and Baja Sur both exist as their own individual zones, while the SIN system is broken down into those 7 zones we discussed earlier. I'd like to go ahead and sidestep for just a moment to address the Mulegé system. So in addition to the Sistema Interconectado Nacional, Baja and Baja Sur, this MULEJE system is expected to also begin publishing hourly load and generation data as a separate system. Now, while the web portal has this MULEJE system listed in several graphics, here you actually see it listed in the Gráfica Demanda section of their website, as soon will be available. The data and geographic topology for this system actually has yet to be released. However, we did want to make it known that a fourth system will exist, and we expect data to begin being published prior to the go-live date in January. If we go back to our energy tree and venture one more level down, we see the zonal LMP points that were represented as purple boxes. Now, there are 104 zonal price nodes, and they are typically associated with demand-side pricing. Each ISO zone in CENACE contains a certain number of these smaller zonal price nodes that can be used for a representative price for load in that area. Now, these have names like Acapulco and Tijuana and La Paz, and they usually correspond with a specific population center with a similar name. For example, the Tijuana zonal price node has actually been placed at the heart of Tijuana, the city in Mexico. Again, these zonal points are hypothetical, and they don't actually represent any physical piece of infrastructure. However, they can be used as a proxy for load in the region. So now we'll go ahead and add the more granular price nodes as small yellow boxes. Again, there are over 2,000 of them publishing LMPs already, and we do our due diligence to try and get as many of them mapped geographically as we can. I'll be going over how we go about mapping price nodes in a little bit, but for now, know that if we put price nodes on the map, it's because we have a certain level of confidence that these price nodes are in this location, or at least nearby. Now, these nodal pricing points offer granular pricing much more than the broader zonal points shown as black diamonds on this slide. This provides for much more representative pricing in areas that aren't located very close to a zonal node, and typically represents pricing at a specific facility or piece of infrastructure. Now, these nodes will have a very cryptic name that provides some insight as to the node's location and the voltage of the equipment it represents. So as an example, the node 07LPZ-115 is in the southern portion of the Baja Peninsula in the Baja Sur system. The 07 in the front actually represents the control region or the zone, which is in this case Baja California Sur. So all the nodes in Baja Sur zone will begin with 07. The LPZ is actually an abbreviation of the name of the substation or plant the node represents, and the final 115 is the voltage of the equipment the node represents. So if we go ahead and add the transmission lines, the substations, power plants, we start to see the significant amount of work that's already been put into creating an accurate geographical representation of CENACE as an ISO. In this way, we can really start to see the benefits of the new CENACE market when compared to the current zonal structure of CFE. For most locations in Mexico, there will now exist a much closer representative price than existed previously. Further, this nodal structure allows for analysis of the different types of price in most cases. As more information becomes available from CENACE, we're going to continue to develop the geography of the ISO. So let's move on and take a look at what data is currently coming out of CENACE. As I mentioned before, this implementation of this wholesale electricity market creates a brand new market structure which will be operated by CENACE. Data has actually slowly started being published on the CENACE web portal. Here we outline what data is currently being published from CENACE. Note that zonal load, zonal generation, and forecasted zonal load from the Gráfica Demanda isn't actually shown here. I'll address those in a few slides. But we do see that they're starting to give out some pricing data as well as some long-term auction results for energy, capacity, and the procurement of clean energy certificates. So those boxes that are now shaded green are actually already included in the Velocity suite. So you can see we're working to incorporate data as soon as we can once it's published. And data that's not already included is expected to be added by the go-live date. Now, as far as the actual load, actual generation, and load forecasts, we've actually had many requests for the load curves and the actual generation data. So we put it at the top of our priority list. Well, I'm very excited to say that we have this data within the Velocity suite. So on the left is a screenshot taken on October 11th from the Gráfica Demanda on the CENACE web portal. while on the right is the data for the same day taken from the Velocity suite. You can see here that we're actually collecting and loading this data for your analysis. We were able to extract the data at hourly intervals as it's published by CENACE. However, this method presents some issues. Since we can really only extract what's available at any given point in time, if CENACE ever fails to publish data, there's really no going back to pick it up. So in this way, this data is considered use it or lose it. Our hope is that a formal publication will be presented in a viable format for downloading historical data. But until then, we went ahead and created processes for loading the data in this format. Now, the data is published at the zonal level, so that's Baja, Baja Sur, Central, and it contains the actual load, actual generation, and load forecast for the current day. Hourly load forecasts are published early morning on the current day, and actual figures are added to the publication throughout the day. So since the load forecasts are released for the current day early in the morning, we actually consider this to be a day-ahead forecast. Another caveat to the actual load and actual generation data is that CENACE doesn't actually report a 24th hour. So by that, I really mean that CENACE only provides actual data on 23 hours for any given day, while they provide forecasted data for all 24 hours. Now, we may consider modeling the actual data for hour ending 24 in the future, but as of right now, don't be surprised to see that hour 24 is consistently missing from this data. And again, I'll make mention to the fact that this data is considered preliminary, and CENACE continues to make updates to their publications and website. We can only hypothesize as to the format this data will be in after go live, but we wanted to go ahead and capture the load data that's currently out there to assist you in your analysis by providing some load shapes. So, in order to map price nodes geographically, we use the resources that are available to us. So CENACE provides what they call the node catalog. This catalog allows us to create relationships from the price nodes to loading zones, control regions, systems, and even specific facilities. Also, this catalog provides some insight as to whether these nodes are load or generation related. Now, the top graphic here is a sample from the node catalog, which is published by CENACE. From left to right, we see they publish a system, a control region, a load zone, the node name, the name of the facility, and the voltage, along with some load and generation classification information further to the right. On the lower left is a schematic diagram of Baja Sur system as published by Prodecent in their 2016 to 2030 expansion and modernization report. While on the right is a screenshot of Baja California Sur taken from the Velocity Suite energy map. Now, price nodes are added in the Velocity Suite map through a relationship to a physical piece of infrastructure. So by pairing the two sources of information available from CENACE and utilizing aerial imagery, we're able to not only locate substations and plants, but also to deduce the names of these facilities. Now, once a facility has been properly identified, we can use this node catalog from CENACE to create the relationship from the price node to that facility. Now, in this example, we have a price node 07LAP-115, which resides in the Baja California Sur system in the Constitucion loading zone at the Las Pilas substation. Well, we know that based on the Prodecent report on the left that the Las Pilas substation is nestled somewhere between the Villa Constitucion plant and the Ropomex substation in the Constitucion zone of Baja California. Now, once we can comfortably locate the Las Pilas substation in Velocity Suite with a fair amount of confidence, we can then go ahead and assign the price node 07LAP-115 to this substation based on the mapping provided by CENACE in the node catalog. Now, in this way, we're able to map price nodes where enough information is available. Now, there remains a fair amount of work that will be done in this way, but we here at ABB have really been working hard to try and map a decent amount of substations and plants and thus price nodes. Because by having price nodes physically located on the map, it allows for geographic analysis of data, such as identifying price pockets, identifying some potential areas for infrastructure development, and even site selection for building new plants and substations. Now, as of late January of 2016, CENACE began publishing preliminary day-ahead LMP pricing data. We've actually been able to capture all the history for this data, as well as any and all revisions that have happened and will happen going forward. As of today, real-time data isn't actually available, though it will be by the January 1st go-live date. We collect and load the LMP the congestion, and the loss data from this publication for all nodes. Currently, I believe there's over 2,300 nodes receiving LMP pricing in the Velocity Suite at an hourly granularity. Now, these prices are published as Mexican dollars per megawatt hour, and we do not convert this to US dollars. So be sure to keep this in mind that this data is in pesos when viewing it in the Velocity Suite. So if we focus our attention on the two rows in blue on this slide, we can start to see some proof that the data published from CENACE is rolling into Velocity Suite correctly. This is day-ahead data for October 10th. Now again, we don't have any real-time data, but as data gets released, we're doing everything we can to include it in the suite for your analysis. Now, CENACE is also providing some data for ancillary service markets. Basically, for those who don't know, ancillary services are specific services and functions available to facilitate and support the continuous flow of electricity so that demand will always be met with supply. Ancillary prices in CENACE are published for 8 reserve zones and for 5 different ancillary services products. Now, this is in large part based on ancillary markets in the U.S., so this should really be nothing new. But we do have all prices for all products for these 8 zones loaded into the Velocity Suite at an hourly granularity. So now that we know what data is currently available, let's go ahead and take a look at what data is expected to come out of CENACE. So here's another look at the data available currently with the green boxes identifying the data that's included already within the Velocity Suite. Now, by comparing what's currently available to what we expect to be available, you can see there's still much development that's expected to come in the next couple of months. I think it'll be really exciting to see how CENACE publishes some of this data. But for now, let's go ahead and have a short discussion on the FTR markets and what we expect to be published and what auctions we expect to be conducted. So for those who don't know, financial transmission rights grant market participants the ability to hedge against the increased costs associated with congestion. In the CENACE ISO, FTRs will actually be defined in 4-hour blocks rather than in peak or off-peak times, which is something not seen in the U.S. markets. Now, CENACE FTR processes will be implemented in 2 stages once legacy FTRs are allocated. So with the exception of legacy or grandfathered FTRs, FTR contracts will be sold in auctions. Now, during the first stage market, auctions will be conducted annually, and FTRs will have 1-year full effective terms. But during the second stage market, both 3-year and seasonal FTRs will be introduced, as well as a monthly reconfiguration auction that allocates FTRs for the next month and the remainder of the year. The first stage market is scheduled to commence operation this month, while the second stage market is scheduled to commence in January of 2017. So we've already touched on most of these, but I wanted to put some emphasis on the issues we've already seen in the data reported from CENACE. First, the actual load and generation data is only being reported for 23 hours of any given day, and this data is currently considered use it or lose it. We are still anxiously awaiting the release of real-time LMP data, and will incorporate this data as soon as possible. Ancillary volumes are being published in a format different than typically published in the U.S., and we'll be working towards incorporating this data prior to the go-live date on January 1st. All of the pricing data you see is going to be published in pesos as opposed to the U.S. dollar. And CENACE is constantly updating their web portal, so we're actively monitoring for the latest and greatest data that they're making available. Now, at this point, I'd like to go ahead and hand the mic over to David Kelley. We'll be discussing developments in power plants, renewable resources, as well as new entrants to the market.
Good morning. As I mentioned earlier, my name is David Kelley. I'm a power analyst here at Velocity Suite. I'd like to begin by addressing the main intentions of Mexico's energy reform while focusing on initiatives aimed at transforming their power generation fleet. Now, the reform has 3 main intentions. 1, they'd like to create new competition against the Comisión Federal de Electricidad, or CFE for short. 2nd, they will ensure fair and non-discriminatory access to the electric grid for all participants. And lastly, the reform aims to achieve 35% clean energy in 2024 by promoting energy efficiency and renewable energy through market incentives and auctions. The headlines you see before you represent the results of CENACE's first energy auction, the main takeaway being that solar and wind contracts really dominated this auction. Their commitment to renewables was evident as 1.1 gigawatts of power was awarded to solar projects and 620 megawatts in wind projects were awarded long-term contracts. This trend continued in CENACE's second energy auction, where solar secured 54% of the 8.9 terawatt hours of annual power supply and 43% awarded to wind farms. Now this chart shows the existing generation permits that have been approved by the Comisión Reguladora de Energía, or CRE for short, between 1961 and June 2016. Using the Velocity Suite Intelligent Chart tool, I've broken generation into two categories, operational and planned, then aggregated capacity to a state level. We can see that Veracruz, Tamaulipas, Baja California, Chiapas have some of the highest online capacities, as shown in green, while Nuevo León, Jalisco, Chihuahua, Sonora, and Coahuila have some of the highest proposed new capacity additions, as shown in blue. Now this chart shows the same data as the previous slide, with an emphasis on which fuel types Mexico is investing in. Taking a look at Mexico's current and future fuel mix, we can see the operational capacity is dominated by natural gas, followed by hydro, then fuel oil. The commitment for wind and solar in their future fuel mix is evident in this graphic through projects that are either under construction or permitted for generation. I'd like to point out that under the reform, clean energy certificates can be awarded to high-efficiency natural gas units that generate both heat and power. This helps explain the proposed new generation in natural gas seen here. I've used the 3D functionality of our intelligent chart tool to show that geothermal and biogas have some proposed new generation, while small projects using coal or diesel are currently under construction. To illustrate where operational capacity is currently located, I've aggregated online capacity to a state level, then used Velocity Suite's intelligent map to color each region based on the state's operational capacity. Now, Mexico's largest oil and gas fields are located in the Gulf states, which also have the largest online capacities. These are Veracruz, Tamaulipas, and Chiapas. Notably, Baja California also has significant operational capacity due to the state's interconnections with the U.S. grid to CAISO. When we turn on the electric generating unit data set, we can see the specific units and their locations, sized by nameplate capacity, and colored by primary fuel type. Now I'd like to add that the power team here at Velocity Suite is currently processing new data being released by the CRE and CENACE every month. We found that our data was primarily accurate in terms of number of units and size. However, we're finding instances where data improvements can and are being made. Our goal is to make our data as accurate as possible before CENACE's go-live date of January 1st, 2017. Moving into Mexico's new entrance landscape, I wanted to illustrate where new generation was being planned. The map you see here shows proposed new generation in Mexico. Nuevo León, Jalisco, Chihuahua, and Sonora have been outlined to show that they have the highest proposed capacity additions. Now, Mexico's northern states have the highest solar radiation in the country. This helps explain why Sonora, Chihuahua, and Nuevo León have significant capacity additions. Jalisco has the fourth largest population in the country, and that helps explain the generation proposed for that region. To get a better idea of which primary fuels are being planned and how big these units are based on nameplate capacity, I've queried for planned capacity additions, or units that are not currently online, colored by primary fuel type, and then sized the units by nameplate capacity. We can see the solar development in the northern states, along with several large wind projects planned throughout the country. Likewise, we see a continued trend of investment in natural gas through several large natural gas units planned for future generation. As I mentioned earlier, the power team here at Velocity Suite is processing new data released by CENACE's various divisions every week. I wanted to show some examples of how raw new entrance data is processed and how we're transforming this information to make it useful within our database. In the project description you see here, we can extract valuable information used for new entrance data in Mexico. Using Velocity Suite's new entrance analysts, we can see where the raw data made its way into our database. We now know that MPG La Bufa is the owner of a proposed wind farm that will install 90 2-megawatt wind turbines and expected to come online in February 2017. Furthermore, raw project descriptions are being translated and any relevant project notes are being added to the plant's reference notes. Power analysts will always add document notes to support our reference notes when applicable. And as you can see here, we found multiple sources to back up our findings on La Bufa. Lastly, new entrance data is making its way into our intelligent map. I'd like to mention that locational data is typically provided with high accuracy. However, new entrance data is only as strong as the information that's provided. This may equate to a nearest city or town. Velocity Suite analysts use a scale of 1 to 4 to assign degrees of confidence when locating power plants. 1 shows we know the exact location, whereas location codes of 4 mean we know the county or state the plant is located in. So, using the Velocity Suite, you can see I was able to identify main intentions of Mexico's energy reform, along with the specific initiatives aimed at transforming their power generation fleet. This wraps up the data expected to be available within Velocity Suite. Now I'd like to pass the mic back over to Ryan Klein to demonstrate some sample analysis he's put together.
All right, so now that you know what data is available from CENACE and the data that's expected to be available, let's take some time looking at why this all matters by doing some sample analysis on the data that's already been published. Again, I'll mention to keep in mind that all data used in this presentation is preliminary and should in no way be considered viable for analysis. Now this chart plots hourly LMPs for all 104 zonal nodes in CENACE from October 1st through October 5th. The x-axis plots the hours, with the y-axis representing the hourly LMP price in pesos per megawatt hour. Now the average LMP price for all zones during this period was 1,097 pesos per megawatt hour and is represented by the constant black line here. However, this really represents 3 completely individual systems. Now, if we compare the peak load during the first 2 weeks of October for all 3 systems, we can identify the broad differences in peak load amongst the 3. Now, notice the difference in scaling on the y-axis between these 2 charts. So putting all 3 of those systems on the same chart, you can see each follows a very similar hourly load pattern, though the peaks are much larger for the CEN system. We placed the CEN system on the secondary axis on this chart just in order to plot the 3 systems together. So you can see here that based on the load in each system, it really doesn't make much sense to compare LMP prices across the systems. Now this chart plots the same hourly LMPs for the same 104 zonal nodes from October 1st through October 5th, with hours along the x-axis and prices along the y-axis, just like we saw before. However, this time I've actually colored the series by system, so you can start to understand the dichotomy between them due to each acting independently of the others. Now the average LMP in Baja California Sur over this period was clearly the highest at 3,335 pesos per megawatt hour, which is roughly $180 per megawatt hour in the US dollars. This compares to 1,048 pesos per megawatt hour for the CEN system and 658 pesos per megawatt hour for Baja California. Now it makes sense that Baja California Sur, Baja California to the north has the lowest average LMP since the system interconnects with WEC to the north. In fact, on October 18th, CENACE just announced their consideration for the Baja system to actually be included in CAISO's energy imbalance market. So it'll be interesting to see the developments there. The main CEN system, the prices you see here are also fairly stable at the lower end of the spectrum, despite much higher peak loads as we saw previously. Finally, we see the highest average prices in Baja California Sur. Now Baja Sur is an isolated system at the south end of Baja California, so it is logical the prices would be much higher. But let's go ahead and use Baja California Sur as an example and dive into some further analysis on the 3 zones that make up Baja Sur. When we create a time series of all prices for all nodes in CENACE during the same October 1st to 5th time frame, this divergence between the Baja Sur system LMPs and the rest of CENACE LMPs becomes even more clear. Here you can see the hours at the top right corner. Now what if we were considering building a new solar farm somewhere in Mexico? Well, We might start with this type of analysis and by identifying price pockets in the entire ISO. Then, once identified, we can focus only on that area. Well, we see prices are highest at the southern tip of Baja Peninsula. Well, what if we were only interested in seeing which nodes in Baja Sur were actually publishing the highest prices? Well, let's take a look. Here you see a heat map of the average LMP price per node over that same October 1st to October 5th time frame. But now, we're actually focusing on just the nodes within Baja Sur. We know from the previous time series slide that Baja Sur has the highest prices of the three systems. But now we're able to compare apples to apples of prices within the Baja Sur system itself. Not surprisingly, we see the highest average LMP prices at the tip of the peninsula. It's really starting to look like geographic limitations are a major concern for consumers at the southern end of Baja California. What's worse, it appears the developed infrastructure near the 07 ETR-115 node actually gets constrained fairly often. We see different prices at each end of the transmission lines there. Now, while we haven't actually heard anything about constraint data or flow gate data, we can reasonably assume that this area experiences noticeable congestion. This area could potentially be a profitable spot to develop a generation facility to alleviate some of the congestion and meet demand to the south. So here we've plotted the day-ahead average hourly LMPs for those three zones that make up Baja California Sur. Those are Constitucion, La Paz, and Los Cabos. Now, in this way, we're actually looking at the hourly average LMP for the system as a whole. This is in green and plotted on the primary y-axis. Meanwhile, we've plotted actual hourly load and generation as blue and yellow lines respectively, and these are going to be plotted on the secondary y-axis. First of all, note the gaps in the line. Now, these represent those holes in the data that we discussed earlier. However, as you can see, Velocity Suite still allows you to plot an incomplete set of data alongside a complete set of data. But despite this data being preliminary, you can already start to see the general patterns in load and generation per day, as well as the relationship to LMP prices. Immediately, we start to see some reasons as to why LMP prices are so high in this isolated system. Hourly load appears to be, on average, about 30 megawatts or so higher than the hourly generation. This provides some further evidence that a new generating facility may be profitable in this area. So now let's focus on one specific price node. Now, I've randomly selected the Navajoa Zone price node. The Navajoa price zone is located on the east coast of the Gulf of California, as you see here. So this is an LMP component breakdown of the Navajoa zonal price node hourly day-ahead LMP. You can see the breakout of LMP components here. Now, we've plotted hourly data along the x-axis and prices in pesos per megawatt hour on the y-axis. The blue line you see represents the actual LMP price, while the stacked columns represent the components themselves. We're starting to see a little bit more congestion being reported as we approach the go-live date, but to reiterate, this data really should be considered preliminary. So this is another LMP component breakdown of that same Navajoa hourly day-ahead LMPs that allows relative analysis on which hours see the highest and lowest prices per day. Now, on the left, you see the average LMP price per hour over that same October 1st to October 5th time frame. The numbers on the outside represent the hour of the day. So you can see the highest LMPs for the Navajoa node occur in the 23rd and 24th hours of the day during this date range. Now, on the right is the average hourly LMP components over the same 1st to 5th of October date range. Not surprisingly, we see the energy component peaking in that same 23rd and 24th hours of the day. Now, you also see congestion peaking in the 24th and 1st hours of the day during this period. Again, I'll mention to keep in mind that this data is preliminary when viewing it in the Velocity Suite. Now, as a side note, I wanted to point out some of the other cool tools available within the Velocity Suite. The Query Scheduling and Linking tool allows users to schedule previously saved queries to run at specific times and output emailed results to a group of emails or distribution lists. Now, it also provides direct links to updated query results for utilization within external data sources, such as Microsoft Excel and Power BI platforms, as well as some other visualization software like Tableau, without having to actually log into the Velocity Suite application itself. Direct export is another tool in the Velocity Suite that tends to go underutilized. Instead of running queries and actually viewing them within the data grid in Velocity Suite, direct export within the intelligent query window allows queries to actually be immediately exported to a file format of your specification. Now, for more information regarding either of these tools, or really anything regarding the Velocity Suite, always feel free to contact our support department. As a general rule, we like to say that if it takes longer than 10 or 15 minutes to find something in the suite, go ahead and contact us, and we'd really be more than happy to get you set up with whatever you may need. So another note to mention for those more interested in forward-looking data would be our advisory services arm. Now, the advisory team works closely with us on the historic data, compiling multiple years of data to produce a 25-year outlook on different sectors of the market. Now, currently, we have custom 1 to 25-year price forecasts available for the new market and can help with any asset valuations. With the CENACE release, our advisory team plans to have these standard and 25-year outlooks for all 10 regions and 53 transmission zones, including expansion plans and fully customizable scenarios for fuels, renewables, and really anything you're looking for. Now, in 2017, the team plans to have a full reference case covering all the scenarios and inputs from this new market. Feel free to follow up with our marketing team after this call or over the chat window to get some more details on what other types of services we offer. So to wrap this up, we started by comparing the new CENACE ISO to the current zonal CFD system. Then we identified the preliminary data that's currently available for analysis from CENACE. We quickly touched on what data has been announced and what will be available in the future. And finally, we showed some ways Velocity Suite can be used to quickly and efficiently analyze this data for investment and development within CENACE. Now, at this time, I'll go ahead and field some questions that were submitted in the chat window during the presentation. The first question we received: are the new zones made up of existing geographic regions like states, or are they their own shape? Well, these zones that are currently going to be existing in CENACE, they should be very similar to the previous CFD zones that existed. We have noticed that some of the zones do represent some state names, but there's also much more granularity in there. We haven't been able to identify any regional breakouts of the zones, but we have located them as points on our map to give a representation that these actually don't represent a physical location, but more a representative zone. The second question we received is CFD still reporting data, and does the Velocity Suite collect this information? Well, prior to the CENACE announcement, I know that we were collecting the CFD zonal LMP prices. We have, in fact, seen this same publication being published on the CENACE web portal. So our assumption is that once the go-live date is passed and we're into January, that CENACE will take over the reporting for the data that was previously being reported by CFD.
CFD will report to CENACE their generation data too. We're seeing a little bit of that as well. Another question that came in is, are you tracking any proposed or planned retirements of existing power plants in Mexico? The answer is yes. The level of detail is not as close as it is in the U.S. That might equate to a power plant announcing that it will retire in 2019, whereas in the U.S. we're getting monthly reports on which plants are planning to retire, and when they do retire, we're getting confirmation on that. So Mexico, it's not as granular, but we are getting future planned retirements. It just takes a little bit more analyst work to dig into articles and find out, did that unit retire when it said it was?
All right, that's the questions. If there's any more, please feel free to submit them in the chat window. Okay, so we just had a question come in. For firm capacity recognition, CENACE will publish the 100 critical hours in each system on an ex-post basis. Will Velocity provide critical hour data throughout the year? You know, that's a great question. We may consider looking into this. I personally have seen that 100-hour critical file that's currently out there that are being used to allocate the legacy FTRs. We are considering incorporating this data into the Velocity Suite. We have had some discussions on how it will fit into the constructs of our current database. My formal answer is we will do our best to include everything that they provide, but I can't give you any formal examples right now. But if you'd like some follow-up on this, we'd love to do some conversation after this presentation and maybe have a little bit further discussion on what type of data you'd like to see. All right, so we have some more in-depth questions, and we'll go ahead and do a little bit further research to follow up with those after the presentation. But at this point, I'd like to go ahead and conclude and thank everyone for attending this webcast today. We hope you learned a little bit about CENACE as an ISO, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for attending.